To find out what your pediatrician wants you to know, I reached out to Dr. Marion Mass. Dr. Mass is a Duke University School of Medicine graduate and board-certified pediatrician on staff with the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, the co-founder and executive vice president of the Practicing Physicians of America, which advocates for a high-quality, sustainable United States medical care system without special interest companies that have taken over American healthcare, a member of the leadership team of Free to Care, that's FREE, the number 2, Care, which works with patients and physicians to make American healthcare price transparent, affordable, and accessible. And if that weren't enough, she is also a Bucks County, Pennsylvania School District Wellness Committee parent representative, which helps to implement wellness initiatives for students and staff, including working as an organic garden coordinator and manager, which together with the school principal and her son, she designed, started, and volunteers to maintain an organic garden to teach students, which resulted in the school being chosen as one of only 3 schools in the whole country nationwide, recognized and featured by the very prestigious Robert Wood Johnson Foundation for Superior Wellness. Wow, Dr. Mass, your long and fantastic history of hard work, fierce commitment, contributions to student, adolescent, and the American healthcare system wellness is absolutely outstanding. Thank you so much for taking time out of your incredibly busy schedule to talk with me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I do have to state right up front that the Wellness Council was something that I had done in the past, but I was on it for multiple years. We did a lot of things with mental health with children. We did do the gardens, as you mentioned. And my newer position that kind of fills that role is I am the Bucks County Medical Society physician representative on the Bucks County Health Improvement Partnership. And I've been that for 6 years. And it's called BCHIP. And so BCHIP actually works with the school districts, the hospitals, the Children and Youth Center, the Center for Aging, you name it. Anyone who's doing good in this county, we work with them and try to fill gaps in health and wellness within Bucks County. And it's the happiest role for me, one of the happiest. So I had to let the wellness in the schools go for, in order to take that on. Because
there's only 24 hours a day. And for the rest of us mere mortals, we couldn't do that. So you're going to have to tell us. My first question to you is seriously, when do you sleep? How do you juggle all of this? You're a mom, a pediatrician, a community volunteer, a nonprofit American healthcare system organization advocate and volunteer. How do you do it? That's actually what we should spend our time talking about today. We could all, us mere mortals, could take a page from you. You should write a book. We should learn something from you. How do you do it?
Good genetics, exercise, kombucha, and lots of vegetables.
Yes.
Yeah. My parents were like this. They would rise at 5 a.m, go out and weed the vegetable garden, and then my mother was. I still remember the farmer up the street, waved my mother down when I was driving with my mother, and my mother's name was Violet, but everyone called her Vi. Hey, Vi, I've got this basket of tomatoes, and you're an ambitious woman. I'm sure you could use this because I just have too many tomatoes. And my mother's threw in the back of the car, and we went home and we made tomato soup, so she was
your
a mother
mom
of
did
5.
A lot of canning?
Oh yeah, I do as well. I do pickles and my own tomato sauce. And and my mother was the oldest girl of 8, born literally to a coal miner's daughter. Wow. And they had to grow their own vegetables, and they had to save and preserve everything. All this stuff that happened during the pandemic, I thought it was so funny because, I can flip my screen and in a minute I'll show you kind of what I got going on in the yard. It's kind of funny because we're in my yard. But and
your beautiful yard.
Yes, well, here, during the pandemic, this is what my husband, the surgeon, built me. So the chicken coop can you see the girls?
Yes, I see the girls.
Yeah. Hi, girls. Yeah, you're
Now,
scratching
how
in
many
there,
do
but
you have?
we have six. We have
Well, I
six.
have to
Yeah.
say, I am really, really proud of myself, Dr. Mass. I feel like, you know what? I am pretty freaking awesome. It's just good to be in great company. So I was inspired during the pandemic from my dad and his mom. I'll tell you the stories later. Speaking of having a farm and growing up on a farm, I had to get chickens. I just had to do it. I can't, this thing of not having protein, meaning eggs, that ran out, just, the supply distribution issues during the early part of the pandemic. It's like, oh, that's never going to happen to me again. That can't happen to my father's grandchildren. He would be spinning in his grave if he knew that, we weren't self-sustaining. We didn't have greens that were growing in our yard. If we didn't have, and I didn't have chickens. So I went out and got chickens. I only have 5.
You can get a lot of
Great
eggs
company.
for 5 chickens, right?
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Oh my gosh. I have so many, I have to give them away to my husband's relatives that fortunately live close to us, because it's an awesome blessing of a problem to have. But look at that beautiful
huge.
garden. Look at all those greens.
Yeah.
Even got sunflowers, all that.
Yeah, and I do
all
it like
lettuce.
the cutting garden portion and the
beautiful.
Yeah. So no, it's good times. And then I actually, my brother just gave me this rose, and I planted. There's a lilac over there, but in between, I make use of the fence, like the chicken fence, this is like butternut squash growing up the side of
flowering
it.
stuff, the climbing vine kind of stuff.
Yeah, and my Lily Pulitzer chicken coop. So because
beautiful, I
said to my husband, "Here, paint it this green," and I showed him a forest green, and then I came home one day and I'm like, "I see."
So we'll do the paint some other time.
Yeah.
The painting,
exactly.
That's the least of our worries.
No, he got industrial strength. It's going to last 10 years. So
there you go.
Okay.
How many acres did you grow up on, Marion? Did your parents have? Did you grow up on?
I grew up on 5, and we did vegetable gardening and weeding, and I felt like it was like indentured servitude every Saturday and Sunday. We either had to clean the garage, the basement, the attic, mow the lawn, cut the lawn, rake the lawn, weed the vegetable garden. I mean, there was never work never went out. So we grew up on 5, and we have 6 here, and we have like a stream, and like my children, we didn't build them a tree house, but they had like a rope that led down into the stream, and they would catch crayfish and frogs, and it was a very outdoor, exploratory, I don't know, it was a good place to be.
I'm inspired. I was like, wow, how cool is this? Again, I feel so honored to be in great company. So I grew up on 5 acres, my brother and I did. And we would complain, during the summer, as soon as school let out, we had to go out with, my mom early in the morning before the sun got up and got hot, and weed the garden and, take care of the garden and all that. And then, we had to mow, the rest of the 5 acres that wasn't the garden. Fortunately, at the time, I thought, fortunately, my mother didn't make me help her can. She canned everything. She put up everything.
I love that. I love we share
fast forward, now I'm like, and even before my mother passed away, I was like, you know what? I should have learned how to can. And then the pandemic happened. I was like, yeah, I should have learned how to can. But I never learned how to can. That's the one thing that they did not pass down to me and I was not inspired to do at the time. But you know what? I figured 2 out of 3 isn't bad. Chickens and, growing, lettuce and, spinach and that kind of thing. Okay, fine. I didn't learn to can, whatever.
Well, you'll come on down sometime. You'll come on down sometime.
I'm going to come and, I don't say it, I may show up at your door when you least expect it. This is beautiful. I wish folks could see what I'm looking at, but this is absolutely green and lush and gorgeous. And it's just a beautiful thing. And I still wonder how you fit it in. That's a lot of work.
Yeah, I do only work part-time clinically. And that's okay, but then that's all that I get paid for.
Right.
Sometimes my husband rolls his eyes and says, "Hey, babe, you're practicing physicians of America. Could you practice a little more?" The kids are in college,
We have 2 kids in college, a third headed that way. Yeah.
Yes, that's what he's saying. So, but we've made it work. Yeah.
What brought you to do this work with young people and the United States healthcare system?
Good question, right? So I think it's timing, and I met my husband in medical school. So he's a surgeon. We went medical school 90 to 94. Duke is it was a unique place. I don't know if it's still the same unique place, but they did not tolerate fools gladly at Duke. Let me just say that, right? You know, like it was, you were going to toe the line. And if you weren't, they were going to make sure that you understood that you had to. But then they kind of guided you. Like it was sort of like a really tough parent with high standards, but a parent that cared about you. I mean, so at Duke, we would have like our surgery rotation, and it was, 20 students, and we met twice a week with Dr. David Sabiston, the writer of the tome on surgery. The chair of the department, the big Sabu, we called him.
Yeah.
He made time twice a week. He cared about us so much that we had a teaching resident just for surgery, like that met with us every single day. And it was like, you were going to learn at that place. And, but it was, so medical school was at that time, and it was kind of like an old school way, I suppose, to go through medical school. People talk about, being a female physician or a minority physician or that sort of thing. And we had, our class was actually 60% male, 40% females, which is kind of astounding for us now, right?
Yeah.
And we certainly had minorities in our class, but and maybe it was happening and I didn't know about it. I never saw people being treated unfairly. I got harassed once, but it didn't reach the level of like reportable. It was just like verging on that. And my fellow students immediately surrounded me and pretty much said, we're watching and we're staying with you, and we're not letting you be in any kind of position where you're alone with this person. It was like, I still remember going through it. You don't know how to handle yourself in those situations. So anyway, we really learned excellence, education, patient always came first. And so then I went off and I did residency in Chicago. And I actually remember meeting with the new chair of our department at the end of residency and sort of saying, like, I felt a marked difference from medical school to here. I felt like there was less teaching, and this is a top program, and I want to talk about that, and I want to talk about things that I saw, and maybe like that will leave you with, maybe you'll make it better here. I did it in a very positive way. And then I worked for 2 years, and then I started having children. Pew, pew, pew. I spit out 3 in 4 years, right?
No, this was after you finished your residency, or was this during residency?
So our first child was born 23 years ago, and it was 2 years after residency. I was working in Evanston, Illinois. And by the way, right near Highland Park, I know it's not enough to say prayers, but, prayers and love and God bless, not just the victims, but like, I can't imagine what you're going through as the family of the perpetrator in that case. I mean, and the whole town and the horror. But so anyway, so there I was 2 years in Evanston, and we had our oldest right before we left. And then we moved back here to Bucks County. And so then you have children, you have 2 children, yes?
Yeah. Yes, I have 2 sons.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Adolescence is a very special time in life.
Oh, it's so special. It's a new form of terrorism as far as I'm
exactly,
concerned.
Right?
I know, they're like emotional terrorists really at that age. But like, so, when you have your children, like, and what I actually very purposefully chose to do, I was a hospitalist for CHOP when I first moved here, and I stayed home with my children. So like I was
CHOP, which is the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia.
Yeah, and I loved my hospitalist job with CHOP, and I'm back with them now in an urgent care setting. I have to make it very clear, I do not speak on CHOP's behalf. I mean, and they know that I advocate, and I whenever it's brought up that I worked for them. But I have actually had some wonderful administrators that work above me that know that I advocate, and they've sent me very complimentary things sometimes about the things that I've written or things that I've said, and it's been wonderfully empowering, and they make sure that I know CHOP is a big tent. But so there I was, like, working nights in a community hospital for CHOP, and then raising the first one, and then the second, and then the third child. And I had some help from my parents at that time when they were little, and then I think I got it's just a fog. I had 3 and 4 years, and you know how it is when they're in diapers. I mean, you're just like...
And you were working full-time. You were a junior attending. You were just 2 years out of training, out of residency.
Part-time, work,
Okay.
but there would be work weeks when I was working full time or time and a
Sure.
half, because sometimes as a hospitalist, it's like nothing.
The
And then
hours, yeah.
sometimes, yeah.
Hours
So it's
sneak
all
up
over
on
the
you.
board.
You're needed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was just like, people say like, are you a night owl? Are you a morning dove? And it's just like, no, I'm a permanently exhausted pigeon, like, so then I woke up maybe when the third child was out of diapers, and I'm like, whoa, what happened to medicine? When I was at Duke, I felt as though we ran the hospital as physicians, not like, haha, we're in charge and step aside everyone and, like I'm in a malignant way, but what our attendings and what our residents and even us as medical students, we had some pull and cachet.
In terms of providing care, Dr. Mass, when you're saying have some pull and cachet in terms of decisions about care for patients, when you're saying...
in terms of decisions of care for patients, in terms of decision of like, oh, look, I need this piece of equipment here. Wait, I need this medication. Wait, this blood needs to be delivered now. I mean, the scrubs ran the hospital. Nurses too, our wonderful bedside nurses.
Absolutely.
The scrubs
You're on the
ran the
front
hospital.
lines.
Yeah, suits. I didn't even know what the suits were really.
Yeah. Right.
And then it was kind of like I fell asleep taking care of children all those years or whatever it was, and I woke up after X many years and I'm like, wait a second, the suits are in charge. And I will never forget.
The bean counters, the accountants are running the show. They're running things. Yes.
Oh, and by the way, how's it working out there, patients? It's
exactly.
bad, isn't it? It's terrible.
Oh, darn, we're so sorry it's not working out. We're going to try our best to make sure that we provide better care. Oh,
exactly.
Fast forward.
Yes.
Oh, we're so sorry it's not working out. We're doing our best to provide the best care. Fast
yes,
forward.
and
we're so sorry it's not working out.
And by the way, why don't you take a person in a suit and put a fox's head on the suit, whapping at their mouth, saying those things, and put them right in front of my hen house.
Yeah,
over there.
right.
And
there you go.
yes, because it's wait, guys, this is just not working out. And so in America right now, all the patients are like, wait, we're paying more and we're getting less. And we don't understand it. And it's like, well, if you do the simple math, if you're paying more and you're getting less, someone is making a lot of money and they're probably a middleman. But we digress.
That's a completely huge conversation. I look forward to having with you another day.
Yeah, we'll need,
That's several conversations.
But at the same time, so all of this was going on in my life of starting to get involved with being a homeroom mom and a soccer mom, and then the wellness mom for the Central Bucks School District, and the garden representative, and starting the garden, and all of those things were sort of going on concomitantly when I'm looking around and thinking, what the heck is wrong with medicine? And I just didn't understand it. I'd go to these house staff meetings and I'd be like, wait, why are you making us do this computer order entry with this program that is very unintrinsic and it's going to have us make mistakes? And I can share a blog with you about that whole scenario. But so my work in advocacy and my work in the community and for wellness and the wellness of my own family. And I guess maybe part of the reason I can get it all done is because I've blended it all together. And so I'll go right from writing a piece and then I'll be like, oh, wait, got to go pick the blueberries, which is what I did this morning. And then I go pick the blueberries and then wait, got to go back. And I'm talking to a reporter today. And then the kids and we're all piling in the car and running off to a thrift store and getting whatever my son needs for his apartment, So I'm doing all this fun stuff in the middle of doing all this other stuff. And I finished a shift late last night, but I don't know. I eat the vegetables and I do the exercise and I sleep like a log. And then I wake up and I start whatever it is that I'm going to start the next day. I can't say all over again because it's sort of different every day.
Right.
So,
ready to conquer the world every day. I have to say there's a lot of things that you do with your work in advocacy. And there's so many things that you address and discuss. I'm a big fan of yours on LinkedIn, a big, I'm just standing in line, behind all the fans and followers. But one of the things that got my attention during our discussions, we would, you and I would go back and forth on LinkedIn having conversations. One of the things that I thought was really interesting was your perspective about the growing burden of anxiety and depression and suicide among our youth. What does your pediatrician want you to know, Dr. Mass, about the growing burden of anxiety and depression and suicide among American youth?
Well, first of all, Dr. Ellington, I'll say that I think everyone has some anxiety. I mean, I'll be the first to say, hey, guess what? Sometimes I have anxiety.
Yeah.
So
it comes and goes, right? It's part of modern life.
Yeah. So, I mean, go back to medical school. So remember, I told you we met with the great Sabu, Dr. David Sabiston, and I had to present a patient to Dr. Sabiston, and I will never forget this because we were told that we had to present a certain way. You know, your white coat had to be buttoned and the stethoscope had to be in the pocket. And when Dr. Sabiston entered the room, you were going to get up from your chair, which was to his left, I think. Yes, it was his left. And then you were going to stand up and you were going to go behind your chair and you were going to present without any notes. And I had not felt anxiety in my life until that moment. And then I stood behind my chair and I'm looking into these steely gray eyes of Dr. David Sabiston. And all of a sudden I could feel it. I started to sweat and my heart started to beat really fast, but I knew I had to present. So I started my presentation and my voice was quavery. I knew everyone in that room could tell. And then it makes you feel worse. You feel like, oh my God, everyone's looking at me. So for the audience to know that I have felt this too, right? And then I caught myself and then I finished the presentation and the rest of it went well and it was okay. And I remember going to my chief resident at the time, this really nice guy. I just remember his first name was Mark, his surgical resident. And he was like, how did the presentation go? I was like, oh my gosh, I thought I was going to die at first. My heart was beating fast. I thought I was going to pass out. I thought I just wanted to crawl under the desk. And then I caught myself. He's like, instead of catching yourself, you could just fall over and pretend to have a seizure. That works too.
Oh boy.
I thought wow, then it kind of hit me. I bet he's felt that sometime. And, in that moment, he was saying, without saying directly, everyone's anxious. And I had some other presentations that I did. And I kind of just learned to talk myself down from my anxieties, right? And then, you fast forward. I was very anxious, of course, when I was a new resident. I was anxious when I was a new attending. I was really anxious when I was a new mom. I remember going through menopause and and I think it's very chemical at that point, having these feelings of, I'm 54 now, but we go through it early in my family, having these feelings of just this overwhelming anxiety of not being able to get done what I need to do. That was about the time, I think, when I was serving on the Wellness Council. And I sort of recognized, we had this big stigma of anything mental health. You're not supposed to talk about it, right? Mm-hmm. And even back then, I think it was 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 children were known to be anxious. And so when I was on the Wellness Council, the person who was in charge of it, when she said, we're going to go around the room and we're going to say, what do we think we should cover this year? What's important for our students in the Central Bucks School District, third biggest district in Pennsylvania, by the way? What's important for us to cover this year? What kinds of topics? And I said, anxiety, anxiety, and anxiety. And by the way, if there's a number 4, anxiety. And so we got this great expert from CHOP, and she came and she talked to us, and we would have these parent meetings, it was free for the community to come to. And I think the Wellness Council helped put it on, and other community groups did too. And usually maybe 40, 60 parents would attend these things. We held this that night. There were over 500 parents in the room.
Wow.
I know, right? And I tell this story to the students and the parents, the kids and the parents that I meet now when they ask about anxiety, because I say to them, you think it's just you, don't you? But it's not. And since the pandemic, I think, go ahead, any pediatrician in America can disparage or dispute. I don't think they would, but I feel like I've seen it double or triple, all of the mental health issues, anxiety and depression especially. We know substance use among teens and then later. And unfortunately, they start with alcohol or they start with marijuana and they gateway to something else. And go take a look at the number of overdose deaths between age, I think 16 and 24. It's just gone this straight up.
Vertically straight up.
Critically, horribly straight up. And those things, the substance use disorder and depression and anxiety, those things are all tied together. Because I think if people if they don't destigmatize and they're afraid to tell someone, yes, I'm anxious, then they may try to self-medicate. And if they self-medicate with alcohol or, Adderall or marijuana, and then unfortunately, some of the marijuana that the kids are smoking is laced with fentanyl. Mm-hmm. And the overdose deaths are sometimes not I injected myself with a bunch of stuff, but oh, well, like I thought I was getting just a cigarette of marijuana, and I didn't get that. I got some fentanyl or fentanyl analogs. Mm-hmm. So what are we seeing out there? I'm seeing the mild form of it. And if we make the one-to-one analogy with like mental health and diabetes, people suffer silently for a long time. They're afraid to tell anyone. And then they wait until it's really, 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 really bad. And then either they hurt themselves, cut themselves, try to kill themselves. And it's kind of like showing up in DKA, like it.
DKA, which is diabetic ketoacidosis, which is the very feared complication, short-term complication of diabetes that can kill you.
Yes,
That's how people before the advent of insulin 100 years ago, the discovery of insulin and how to use it effectively, the diagnosis of diabetes was a death sentence.
Yes, 100%.
Because of DKA, you go into DKA diabetic ketoacidosis pretty quickly. But yes.
Yeah.
So your analogy, Dr. Mass, you were saying your analogy of affective disorder is a fancy name for anxiety and depression is you compare it with an analogy to the diagnosis of diabetes. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So I guess what I'm thinking is that if you are suffering quietly inside your own mind, living inside your own brain without telling someone else what you have going on and how you're hurting and, the pain, the depression, the anxiety that you're feeling, and you're not talking about it, you're taking a small little problem, like it's like a snowball at the top of a mountain, and you're like, it's not in your control, and you're pushing it down the hill and you're letting it get bigger and bigger and bigger, and you get to the bottom and it's just going to smash open, and then it's out of your control, as opposed to picking up that snowball and like, hey, wait, here's the snowball right here. And whether it's diabetes or, your early physical symptoms, and you do have very physical symptoms with anxiety and depression, right? I mean,
yes.
People get stomach aches and headaches and palpitations, and they'll have feelings of breathlessness. You have physical symptoms just like you do with diabetes. Like, you eat more, you pee more, you're losing weight. And, if you don't tell someone about those symptoms, then those symptoms will grow bigger and bigger, just like a snowball, until they're a snowball out of control and they're away from you, and it's harder to get to them. Not impossible. You can find people that'll stop the snowball as it's rolling down the mountain, but those things are all happening. And in the pandemic itself, I felt like there was multiple reasons. I mean, some people were depressed because they lost loved ones. Some people were depressed because they were isolated. Mm-hmm. Some people were depressed because they couldn't do their sports. Some people were depressed because they thought their grandma might die. Some mm-hmm. people were anxious because they thought their mom might die or they might die. And some people were anxious because they thought they would never go on a date, or they would never have a prom, or they might not go to college, or that the world might not be the same. It will never be the same. But I think we have to find a way to, bring that back. And I'm actually, can I tell you why I'm hopeful?
Please tell us why you're hopeful, Dr. Mass.
I'm hopeful because I see people talking about it. And I see people I see kids talk about it in a clinical setting. Sometimes then they'll come back. I had a patient not that long ago that came in, and I usually give them some tips and techniques because, gosh, they can't get into, there's no availability. The psychiatrists, the psychologists, the counselors, they're socked in for months. And so all of my colleagues in pediatrics are doing this in their primary care settings, even in the urgent care settings and the ER settings. But why I'm hopeful is we're starting to talk about it, and we're talking about stigma. And we have groups like my health improvement partnership in the county that have a coalition of hospital and children and youth centers, and their tendrils are into the schools, and they're into other wellness groups within the county. And they're not only talking about it at the county level, but they're talking about it at the national level. I don't know if you know this, but House Bill 7666 in Congress passed with 400 votes, the mental health bill. And I actually tweeted about it when it first came out because I was delighted, and I took it right to the Bucks County Health Improvement Partnership. I took it to the district attorney in our county. I took it to the head of the Drug and Alcohol Commission in our county. I know all these people. I'm like, take a look at this. There's all these wonderful grant opportunities that are going to help us with stigma and maternal mental health and youth mental health and substance abuse disorder. I think it's actually a big, beautiful bill. We've got to do something. We've got to, get together our resources. And I know that there are those out there that will say, oh goodness, we're going to spend all of this money and we have to be careful because we might be creating a monster. Because, just like any money that gets appropriated, sometimes people come along and they say, hey, here, I'll take that money and I'll do this. And they don't do it. Right.
Right.
Like it ends up in, but I think instead
There's
of
always
saying,
going to be that component of
yes,
fraud, waste, and abuse with resources. There has to be systems in place to address them or monitor for them and, be vigilant. That should not preclude us though from saying, look, these are resources we need for mental health. We're doing this, we've done this with Medicare, Medicaid in terms of putting things in place to prevent fraud, waste, and abuse. We can do it for mental health too.
And in our
that should not be a fear or concern.
No. I'm ready to say to my community, okay, let's be the model of how we can do this the right way.
Yes.
And let's see what we can do so other communities could do the same thing. And then we could learn from each other. I mean, because there's no real answers, Dr. Ellington. There's no real, here's the cookbook of what you're going to have to do to fix youth anxiety. It's just not there. I think it's going to be some mix of talking about mental health from an early age, forming a vocabulary about it.
Normalizing the discussion, as you said,
yes,
that you're seeing happening.
Yes. Appropriating good wellness habits. What do you do when you're feeling anxious or depressed? You go out, you exercise, you dig in the dirt, you plant flowers, you breathe in the air, you go visit sheep that live in your neighborhood if you're lucky like me, right next door. They have donkeys and pigs too, and it's wonderful. I love it here. But I'm lucky that I have that, but people have to look and see what could they do in their own community. Maybe just going out and helping others when, and teaching these things as habits when kids are little, like the preventative component. And I honestly do really, truly think, and I think this is something that you and I share, all of the healthy habits like the eating and the good, clean eating, I really think those things are going to help us almost be a vaccine against mental health problems. No vaccine works 100%, right? Yes. No vaccine prevents, we see this with COVID. It's not preventing COVID, people, but maybe it'll prevent the bad parts of COVID or severe COVID
symptoms and complications.
Yes. So anyway, I'm feeling excited, empowered because this pandemic gives us the opportunity to think about our wellness habits, because those are a big part of how we can prevent COVID too. And it gives us the opportunity to, we all had to stop and we all had to stay inside. And I enjoyed that probably less than 80% of America. Don't make me slow down. Don't make me not socialize. It's bad. And my kids said that to me too. They're like, this is not going to be good for me. But some of us, everyone stayed home. More people were gardening. More people were cooking. I don't know how many sourdough loaves. I actually, that's what I need to learn to do. And I think that taking up some of those habits, those are sort of like a backbone to wellness, like slowing down and, smelling the roses, planting the roses, cultivating the roses, baking the bread, making your own coleslaw or salad and putting, edible flowers on top of your salad, all these crazy things that people did and took photos of and spread around. And really doing all those things in tandem with working in our communities, looking out for each other, developing the vocabulary. I'm actually celebrating the fact that Congress passed this bill, not that they're the answer, because it's really we the people that are the answer, but that they get it and that they're potentially helping to empower us. And they did this in a very bipartisan way. This bill, it was from the desks of Frank Pallone, a Democrat from New Jersey, and Kathy McMorris Rogers, a Republican from Washington State. And their leadership in the Energy and Commerce Committee, which is the healthcare committee, 400 lawmakers in Congress at the House level voted for this. I think there's only 435 of them. L to the other 35. Sorry, dude, you lost out. L for you lost out, and L for lame or whatever we'd say. But what a great launching spot, and taking something like this and making sure it gets it over the hump in the Senate, and then becomes law and gets signed. I think it'll be a great day for America and for all of us to realize that that's only the beginning, because it's really us and what we do with something like that in our communities, with our families, with our schools, I said community, but I'll say it again, because it's what we do that's, I think, really going to help. That's why I'm feeling hope.
Tell me about this bill that it looks like it will pass. And can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Okay, so the bill reappropriates some grants for various communities in the areas of youth mental health in general. And I know I'm not sure if some of the money is new appropriation or reappropriation, but there's mental health on Native American reservations. And I actually lived on one in medical school for a month as the Northern Cheyenne in Montana. So near and dear to my health, you can see the problems there are they're entrenched and they need some help. Maternal mental health, a big deal. Like, we as moms, when we become moms, it's sort of like the dirty little secret. No one tells you that you're so isolated when you're a first-time mom, right? Because you're like waking up in the middle of the night.
In modern society, yes, but historically, in many cultures, that wasn't the case, and there's reasons why it shouldn't be the case. And we think we know everything here, new, modern, different in the United States, and we think we have all the answers. Moms should not be isolated. They should not be on their own, isolated with newborns. And historically, cultures have addressed, that's addressed in those cultures that we've forgotten about.
100%. I mean, remember the red tent, if you ever read that book?
Yeah.
The Jewish culture did that. I'm sure the Muslim culture did this. The Native American culture did this, where everyone was surrounded and had help. And, I'm Irish, German, Ukrainian, my mother and father were each one of 8. And when someone had a new baby, it was everyone came, the baby was the celebrated thing and the mother was helped. And, but then there were families.
Yeah. A dear friend of mine, I was living in New York City in Manhattan at this time with my first. And my dear friend who I worked with when I was at NYU, New York University, and I was in their primary care department at the Student Health Center. I'll never forget this. She showed up at my door with 2 cans. She canned this herself of vegetable soup. And I can't tell you how, I couldn't understand why I felt this way. But I had to call her up after I had some of her soup. And I said, you know what? I am a wealthy woman. I said, I felt that just eating your soup, I just felt so cared for. And it's everything's going to be okay. I'm going to be okay. I'm going to get enough nourishment to be able to nourish my child, breastfeed and, nourish my newborn. Speaking of anxieties, my issue was when I had my newborns, both my sons, my anxiety was I didn't have postpartum depression, but I had significant anxiety. I would come up with these scenarios like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have a seizure, and what if I pass out with the baby here by himself, and something happens to me, then something will happen to him because I'm here by myself. Their dad was at work, on call. He was a physician, so he's not going to be there. What happens if something happens to me? Crazy. And I'm using the word because that's the way I thought of it, but it was basically part of a postpartum kind of thought disorder. I really thought, wow, if I'm by myself with these kids and something happens to me, oh my gosh, and they'll die a slow death and it'll be my fault and they'll suffer. This poor innocent creature will suffer, blah, 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 blah. But yes, there's that culture of having a newborn's mom, the moms who just had a child, surrounded with meals are brought over historically in the United States. That's one thing that we used to do. Yeah, much needed, and it was lost, I think, in this country. And we've realized, coming full circle, our modern way is not the best way often.
Right. And not a good idea. And actually, if you think about the pandemic itself, sometimes people lost their mothers, the mother that would have helped guide them, which is a horrible tragedy. Or sometimes the mothers just said, well, I'm not going anywhere, and you're doing this by yourself. I mean, maybe they would have the mother by phone, but whole families were angry at each other and not talking to each other because some of the family was worried about COVID, and the other half of the family was well, I think I'm going to be okay, and I'm going to, I'm healthy, I'm young, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. I mean, we just didn't know what to too. And I think we should talk about those things. But you actually bring up a really good point because, see, I would never have guessed you to have ever been anxious, which probably the audience might say the same thing about me.
That's what every adolescent thinks. We all think, and even those who have not been adolescents for maybe close to a half a century, we think that it's just us. And thank you so much for bringing that up. Normalizing the conversation about our mental health and without the stigma and saying, hey, is it just me? It must be just me because everybody else has a smile on their face. It must just be me. And it's so isolating. So yes.
And the mental health of parents, because you brought up how you felt anxious, but you clearly had someone or you yourself coached yourself through that time to where you're not there anymore, right?
Correct. Also, I think there are hormones involved. That's why I said, this was postpartum issues too. So that's, I'll leave the science out of it. But yes, in addition to the hormone piece of it, that went away when the hormones went away, right? The breastfeeding hormones, the postpartum hormones and the breastfeeding hormones and that kind of thing. And when we don't have the trigger with the hormones, we still need to be able to recognize it and say, okay, is this something that I can work through? And should I be working through it alone? I need to talk with someone to let someone know, normalize this conversation. And I want to say that, first of all, I think I'm flattering myself again, because I keep comparing myself to you and saying, oh my gosh, I'm an awesome company. Because in my first book, What Your Doctor Wants You to Know series, what your doctor wants you to know but doesn't have time to tell you, I use the analogy of depression and diabetes. And I said, look.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, right? So I said, look, there's no stigma against having type 2 or type 1, just diabetes, right? There's no real stigma because it's something that's felt that we don't make enough of a certain hormone or protein, in this case, insulin. And there's no stigma around that. There's no shame. Same thing with depression and affective disorders like depression, anxiety. You don't make enough of the right amounts of neurotransmitters. Where's the shame in that? And there's different things that can cause the neurotransmitters to be kind of out of shift, out of whack. Why should there be a stigma about that? It's the same exact thing. So yeah,
100%.
Right? So if you can give us some tips, or those of us that don't have access to nature and peace and the beautiful streams and all that, something that we can teach our adolescents, our pre-adolescent children, and maybe even before then. And our adolescents, adolescent goes up to age 25, the adolescent brain, is still forming until age 25. Can you give us some tips that you give your patients and that you talk with your wellness groups to in real time that we can teach our children and adolescents to use when we're feeling anxious?
100%. I love that. I love that you asked me that. It's just perfect. I am in such great company. I do this. I tell kids this. And I actually employed this method when I had insomnia. I had insomnia at around age 41 and I couldn't fall asleep. And I was just like out of my head, because I couldn't sleep. I'm like, oh my gosh, every night I'm lying in bed. I'm like, I can't sleep. I look at the clock. I can't sleep. This is terrible. This is awful. I'm going to wake up and I'm not going to have slept. And I realized I had become anxious about the insomnia. I went to a sleep specialist. It took all of 3 weeks. I can't suffer in silence. You know what I mean? No stigma. I'm like, I need help. Help someone. I'm not functioning well.
That's right.
Here. Yeah.
I'm with you.
So he taught me the trick of, he called it self-hypnosis for sleep. And I tell this to kids. And so what I start with, and it depends upon the age, but I'll say, think of the place where you feel the most happy and relaxed. Maybe it's your grandma's house. Maybe it's the beach. Maybe it's your garden. Maybe it's your own bedroom. Those are the things that I hear the most, right? Well, me, it's the garden. And I say, okay, so then I want you to pretend and I want you to practice this with your mom every day, or your dad, or both your mom and dad, or one or the other. And it's important. I'll tell you why I have it practiced with the mom and dad. But pretend you're at the top of a set of stairs. When you start, maybe it could be 20 steps. And then as you get better at it, maybe it'll be 10 steps. And so I want you every day, at some point in the day, take 10 or 15 minutes, close your eyes, lie down, turn on some nice, calming music, be with your mom or your dad to help you practice. and you're at the top of that stairs and you close your eyes and you pretend, all right, so like, let's just pretend that we're going to go to the beach, because almost everyone's been to the beach. So you're going to close your eyes and you're going to take a step down and you're going to blow your air out and you're going to pretend that you see the beach below you. All right. And so you're on that step and you start to see more and more detail. You see the waves, you see the sand, you see the sky, you see the planes that are flying by that says "Eat at Joe's," right? You see the whole, like, imagine the detail. Take another step and you go down, and each step that you take, you pull in another sense. Now you're going to smell the salt air. Can't you just smell it? Like, it's called The Beach, by Calvin Klein, maybe, like from Seinfeld, haha, right? So you take a step down, you smell the salt air, you smell the suntan lotion, you smell like that smell of like caramel kettle corn, and so then you take another step down. Now you start to hear the waves crashing. You hear the gulls making noise. You hear like two children arguing on the beach blanket next to you. You hear like the sound of like maybe the boardwalk, if you're at a beach with a boardwalk. I don't know what you have at your beach, You go down like another step. Now you're going to start to feel. You're going to start to feel like, pretend that like the air hits you, like humidity that hits you if you're, like us on the East Coast here, right? Like the wall of humidity, you get down more steps, like you pretend you're walking on the beach. You feel the sand and, ooh, it's hot. I've got to run to where the sand is wet. And then you feel like the wet sand between your toes. And as you're doing this, you're going down all those steps. When you get to the bottom and you're on the beach and maybe someone like buries you in the sand and you're underneath the umbrella and the waves are washing over your toes. And then like you tell yourself, I'm in my happy spot here. And my brain is really strong. My brain is the strongest organ in my body. And I can tell my brain that I'm going to be calm and relaxed, even when I don't feel that way. Even I can do hard things. I can convince my brain that I'm going to be okay. And whenever I'm telling this to the kid, like the kid is like excited about the beach. And the mom is like, I think I need to do this, right? Because what's the dirty little secret? A lot of this anxiety, it's coming because the parents are anxious too, and it's okay that they're anxious. I'm anxious, but I've learned, we used to say as parents, my husband and I, never let them see you sweat, right? Not that they can't know that we're anxious at times. As they got older, they learned that. But if you're employing self-control methods and calming yourself down when you're upset about things, your child is going to feel that anxiety.
Absolutely. How does it go? Happy mommy, happy baby, right? So our mental health, our emotional health, our emotional well-being is directly transmitted to our loved ones and to our babies, our young ones that are dependent on us. We're their environment. We create their environment. So whatever we're feeling, it gets transmitted. They pick up on it.
Practice every night, 10 minutes. All of us should be doing this every single day. I mean, look, I know, I get it. I'm lucky. I'm sitting under an apple tree next to my chicken coop, next to my vegetable garden, next to the neighbor's sheep, next to the flower garden, the whole 9 yards. But, you can dream of having that. I didn't always have this. I mean, I lived in a cramped little apartment in Chicago in residency and, a cramped little apartment in, North Carolina. And, I didn't always have all this. So even if you're a kid, just take the place that does make you happy, get to that place in your head, practice that with your parents. It's going to help your parent. It's going to help you. It's going to help your every day. And then when you come up against a feeling of anxiety, then you'll be able to get to that same spot quickly, maybe down 5 steps, 3 steps even, to take yourself to the spot, to train your brain that, and tell yourself your brain can do hard things. That's what I want. That's what your pediatrician here wants you to know.
Awesome. Perfectly said. I cannot thank you enough, Dr. Mass. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
It's my great pleasure. I'm always delighted when someone asks me to talk, Dr. Ellington. I clearly love to do it.
Well, I can't wait. We're going to have you come back because, you're,
of course,
as the young folks say, speaking of kids, you're spitting facts and much appreciated. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for everything that you do, and enjoy the rest of your summer. And then you're going to have to come and visit sometime. We got a lot of gardening, canning, and thrift storing to do.
It's a promise.
I love it.
Thanks again. All right.
All right.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.